everybody, and welcome to Transportation Accessibility for Reduced Mobility User session. My name is Bajek, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. I am the chairwoman of the board of directors of the Greater Waterbury Transit District. And what we do at the district is we oversee transit for the elderly and disabled riders in 9 municipalities, including Cheshire, Middlebury, Naugatuck, Prospect, Southbury, Thomaston, Waterbury, Watertown, and Wolcott. Available transit services are ADA, non-ADA paratransit, and Dial-A-Ride. I'm also an AARP Connecticut Community Outreach and Advocacy volunteer with a focus on livable communities where affordable housing is integrated with transportation. So this session is really important to me. Now, I'm going to introduce our panel in 1 second, but before I do, if you're not a panel member, if you would put yourself on mute and close down your video. Also, if you have any questions, you can put them in chat as Tony will be moderating them. And we'll get to as many questions as possible today. So I'm going to turn it over to, I have two panel members, Elaine Kolb and Verveen Cordner. And I'm going to start with Elaine. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, it's taken quite a bit for us to get this together, but here we are. Yes. Okay, I'm Elaine Kolb. I'm 72, and my description is I'm kind of a hefty, old, ruddy white dyke driving a 6-wheeled power wheelchair, flying a rainbow flag. Anyway, I live in West Haven, Connecticut now, and 44 years ago at this time, I was just about to get out of the hospital. I was literally stabbed in the back on September 30th, 1977. And I was about to get out of the hospital after being, if anything, abnormally healthy. And then I came out partially paralyzed and had to go back and live at a place with 22 stairs. And I could only take a few steps. And then I had to allow myself to be institutionalized. And I had to live on the grounds of the Georgia Mental Health Institute in an institution in order to get accessible housing and transportation. And the only reason I was able to get out to freedom was that I regained enough strength to climb up and down on the inaccessible buses. So I have devoted all these years to trying to help make sure that people with disabilities, all different kinds of disabilities, have the accessibility needs met, and they're all different kinds of accessibility needs. But 30 years ago, 33 or 31 years ago now, I have last year's t-shirt. 30 years I was involved in helping to get the Americans with Disabilities Act passed, which is why we have as much accessibility as we have, and we need more. So that's enough about me, and here I am. And Bavern, I am so glad you have joined us. We had a wonderful conversation this morning. Go for it.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Betty. And thanks for helping me let my voice be heard. I initially got involved with issues around transportation because I am a case manager with the Department of Developmental Services. I have adults who want to move out their family homes, who want to establish their own homes in the community. And we were limited as to what communities they could join because we were limited by transportation and the 3/4 mile radius away from transportation that ADA provides. So it became just very creative ways of getting people to enjoy their vision for a good life with the barriers that are set up by infrastructure and the system when they already have barriers to overcome. Additionally, one of the reasons why I'm really interested in making sure that community voices are heard is because I have a visual disability where I cannot drive at night. And I've been trying to use the different train stations around the area to get to and from things. And I have to literally go to New Haven for arts and culture entertainment, not because there isn't anything here in Hartford and Manchester, but it's very easy to get to New Haven on the rail line. We need to do that everywhere. We need to make sure that people are not being excluded by this way of building things that are supposed to be helpful. They tend to be very exclusive. We might have accessibility here, but that excludes someone over here. So you'll hear me saying a lot today that we need to focus on doing things from a universal design perspective. And that's it about me. I don't feel like I need to give more credentials, but you can look me up on UConn DPP. I'm an MPA fellow there in the Policy and Public Administration program. And again, I'm a case manager with the Department of Developmental Services.
Oh, thank you, ladies. So let's get our conversation started. Let's give a foundation question out. What does the word accessibility mean to you? And either one of you can start.
Well, all right. I'm so shy. So accessibility has many different layers and dimensions. The average person thinks that it's just, oh, we're talking about wheelchairs. And yes, we are, because wheelchair accessibility is very important. At the same time, there are many different kinds of access that are denied to people for different reasons. So it's really important. I love the universal design approach. This morning, the keynote speaker was talking about universal basic mobility, which I thought was a cool concept. And then the adjunct to that is, in order to get that, you need universal design. So, I'm thinking that we need to look at it in terms of every individual is a little bit different too. So what can we provide in making as much access as possible in as many dimensions as possible? So it's not everything can be verbal, because
Right.
not everybody can manage words. Not everything can be visual, because some people don't see. And some people have difficulty understanding things. So there's a lot of things to be taken into consideration when you talk about access, but attitude is one of the biggest ones. Attitude is one of the biggest ones.
So generally when someone asks me what accessibility means to me, I actually say it means nothing. And the reason why I say that is because accessibility is only what someone else thinks they need to do to provide access to someone else. I prefer to look at things as, how can we build or design things that are inclusive for everyone so that we don't have to worry about giving access because it's already there. One of the things that I really found in my experience, just learning to use the transportation in the system at night, is there's not a lot that's out there for people with visual disabilities. But that made me think even more that there isn't anything out there in these multimodal stations that are already in existence for people who are hearing impaired. There may be announcements that visual people can hear, but there isn't enough timing to respond to those announcements. You don't see Braille on the walls. You do not see pictures directing you to different places. So when we think about accessibility, we need to think about accessibility as a barrier within itself. Because if you're making things accessible for one set of people, you might be excluding other people. We need to get away from the accessibility talk and start designing and implementing infrastructure that works for everyone. And will there be exceptions, even if we build the best? Yes, but how you get that done is by making sure that community voices are included in the process when we're making policy and designing infrastructure to make sure that everybody has access to where they need to go.
Hey, that's a whole different perspective that you put this on. That's fabulous. So accessibility. So as you're talking about that, then if we don't have that inclusiveness, what are the consequences?
That very specific sets of people are excluded. And it's an unintentional consequence of planning and designing buildings, roads, streets, even vehicles, with not trying to serve the broadest amount of people possible.
I think it's deeper than that and more profound. And it's what most people don't even think about or talk about. And I believe we need to address directly ableism and disabilitophobia, because most non-disabled people would rather be dead than to be like me. And they say so, sometimes to my face. So this is the thing. We, as people with disabilities, have value. Our lives are dignified as we are. We contribute a lot to the community, and we deserve to have basic needs met. Instead, what is happening is that, especially now, see, a lot of things have been revealed by the current craziness we're going through with the COVID stuff. It has brought a lot of things to the forefront that were always there, but a lot of times people didn't see them. Now you can't help it. It's there, and you can see. Frontline workers, first responders, essential workers. Guess what? A very high percentage of them are from minority communities. Yeah. And who are having a hard time dealing with the technological side. The Zoom is wonderful if you have the technology. If, that's a huge if, or if you know how to use it. So the thing is this, we as people with disabilities, all different kinds of disabilities, have been put in the position of not really being full citizens. Think about it this way. It was not until 1975, with the passage of the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act, 1975, that it was even necessary to attempt to teach children with disabilities in what was called public education.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not until the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990 that it was necessary for public transportation to include our people. And guess what? We still have to fight every day to get a ride. Every day we have to.
I want to piggyback on that, because in getting ready for today, I kind of reached out to a variety of people, and I had a story shared with me. There's an individual who feels like every door is closed to them. And the reason why they say that is because if they are entering a building or something with an automatic door, the entryway, they can get in fine. But then you get into the building and a lot of the other doors do not have that pad to let you in. That person also expressed that paratransit is a stopgap, not a solution. It's not extensive or frequent, it's territorial. And people spend time waiting for it, or they have to cut off their activities to join it. There are people who are in the northeastern part of Connecticut where there are transportation paratransit deserts between systems. And I wouldn't go into the last story, but too detailed, but one person who wants to visit, now listen to the town, one person who wants to visit her parents in Meriden, but she lives in Newington, has to take 4 paratransit buses just to go visit her family for a town that's really only 15 minutes away from each other. I mean, how ridiculous is that? So I hope that as we continue this conversation, we'll be getting some, more optimistic plans in place to really help people who have barriers right now, even just to visit their family.
Well, you see, this is the thing. Right now, we are in competition with the one that's talking about transportation problems in rural areas. Hello? Guess what? Those are transportation deserts. A whole lot of them are. And yes, I can also testify from lots of personal experience that even if you theoretically have access, and the vehicle that you're trying to get on has a lift or a ramp or some such thing so that you're theoretically supposed to get on, that doesn't mean that it's going to work or that the person who is supposed to operate it knows how to do it.
Right.
I have been stranded for many hours in very odd places because I go. I'm not going to stay home. I go. And that means every time I try to take a trip where there has to be some kind of intersection where I have to go from this to that, a transfer of some sort, sometimes multimodal. That's what they're talking about here, multimodal. It is a nightmare. It's a complete nightmare, and not for the faint of heart.
As you're talking about that, Elaine, is it not just the, and I'm going to use the word accessibility to the transportation, but is it also a matter of driver training?
Yes, and attitude. But yes, driver's training, attitude, upkeep of the equipment. They will say, "Oh, we didn't know you were coming." Well, you're supposed to, and I'm talking about this now because some of us, we have to use the all of the above, buses, over the interstate buses, Greyhound and whatever, they're all mixed up now, but and then the local things, whatever you have, trains. I do all of them. I've traveled all over the country using all these different modes. And I can tell you that it is terrifying. And you don't know. You have to be prepared for being stranded sometimes for hours, a couple of times for days. And I've experienced it.
I have not gotten stranded for hours, but just last week, because I walked into the station and the train that I needed to take wasn't listed with the track number, I actually missed the train, even though I was waiting in the station for 20 minutes, because when they finally did announce which track it was on, they only literally give you 5 minutes heads up. There's no way you can get from one side of the station to the other in 5 minutes. And so I actually had to sit out in the cold for about an hour and 15 minutes waiting for the last train of the night with my 11-year-old daughter in New Haven, praying, praying that I got the track right for the next train, because I did not want to get stranded until 6 a.m. or pay Uber $120 to get home. So, and I don't have some of the other types of disabilities that other people have around, cognitive, seizures. We have to really think about how we can make sure that everybody has at least a chance to get themselves around, familiarize themselves, and be able to keep themselves safe. You're talking about safety when you're getting stranded in different places. You're talking about being out in the cold. You're talking about having people look past you because you don't know where you're going, what you're doing, or seem and irritate if you ask. So, you know, we have to make sure that we are, when we think accessibility and all this other, that we're just thinking of like, what would a human who couldn't do this need to be safe?
And in
It's
some
really
cases,
just that
that means
simple.
somebody does need to travel with you.
And that's restrictive. How can you be independent if you need an aide to travel with you just because the
Well,
transportation system doesn't work properly?
well, I'm just saying, some people need someone to travel with them,
Yes,
period.
right,
Exclamation point, underscored.
right.
And sometimes the person traveling with another person with a disability who absolutely has to do the traveling um, is not, well, for example, we have a horrible medical transportation system here in the state of Connecticut under Medicaid. It is horrendous. And it is very, 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 did I say very? Messed
Yes.
up. And all these different systems, like I, one person in particular who cannot travel by herself, absolutely cannot, in a power wheelchair, but she can't, and she can't hear, and she just can't do it. She has to have her partner with her, but they will not transport him. Like, so, and I went through this too because my partner Patty Deek, she died in 1999. I was primary caregiver for her too, and I had to get to the hospital, but I couldn't get in the ambulance, so she would go in the ambulance, and I would ride my power chair to St. Raphael's because sometimes there was no transportation that was going that late at night too, which is the other thing. So there's time periods, there's location periods. There are some places you could only go when that particular line is operating. It's not just 3/4 of a mile from the fixed route bus service, but it's 3/4 of a mile from the fixed route bus service if the bus is running at that time. If not, you
Right.
don't get to do it.
Mhm.
And then they keep changing that. They keep changing it. Do you know how crazy making it is to try to figure out how to do anything? And you're not supposed to scream.
Right. In the chat, we have April Chaplin, who's one of the Connecticut mobility managers. She said
Good.
that overlapping paratransit districts has been something Connecticut mobility managers have discussed for some time. This will be a collaborative feat that we can fully support. And then also, one of the most common calls or complaints she ever receives is, why does a state as small as Connecticut have so many different transit districts? So there's so many disconnects, and I can understand why you would be stranded someplace, especially during, like off-peak hours, if you will, or there are people who work a night shift. How do they get back and forth to work if there's no transportation?
Right.
So this is really eye-opening.
Well, talk about eye-opening. Let me throw something else in. I have a
Okay.
very, very close friend of mine who is completely blind. And he's very active. He's a social worker. And he's done all kinds of things. Now, years ago, I used to live in Georgia. Years ago, he was trying to go to interviews for a job. And one of the times at the bus station, they put him on the wrong bus. They put a blind person on the wrong bus that went to the wrong place, and he had no idea until he got there and found out that it wasn't where he was supposed to go. So I'm just saying that we need really to step back and think it through, but to realize that every individual deserves to have universal basic mobility. I really like that concept. And that addresses so many different things. But yes, the thing is that it's the zoning. This kind of collates over into other things. Sometimes it's the local entity doesn't want to have public transportation in their area very much.
And
Thank you very
accessible
much.
housing.
Thank
Right.
you. Thank you.
The
So,
integrated with,
and Connecticut is one of the worst places in the country for such things.
all right, so let's flip it a little bit.
Okay.
What is working? Can we point to some examples that of infrastructure or systems that is a model, or does
Okay, well,
even anything like that
I've got
exist?
something I can tell you because I helped to make it happen. We have in the state of Connecticut right now one of the best accessible taxi services that's anywhere in the country. Now, it still has its limitations, doesn't everything, but um, it is possible. Now, it doesn't cover the whole state. They've expanded a little more, but it's made it possible for me, personally, and other people I know, to, in circumstances where they needed transportation, didn't have time to call up my ride, or it was the wrong time, it was the middle of the night. I mean, when you got to have it, you got to have it. And so this could be expanded. And it would also solve the problems in the rural areas more. Subsidized, on call, accessible transportation. Yes, it works. It's wonderful. It is nothing new. It has been done for many years. It can be expanded.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the chat.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Accessibility improvements are often improvements for all. Improving evening and weekend transit schedules, frequency lifts all boats or charges all mobility devices. That Tony put that in there. And April responded with paratransit application process is now much easier. And let's see.
Let's make sure that some of this infrastructure money, billions of it being thrown around, that a significant amount of it goes into the infrastructure to provide universal basic mobility in the state of Connecticut. It can be done. The money is there. Do we have the will? If we push it, if we collectively get together and decide this is something that we want, it's doable. The infrastructure is right there. And by the way, some of the taxi drivers are talking about quitting because they're having a hard time making a living, and they're working very hard. This is something that could be done now. It would help a lot of people, and it can be subsidized and would be inclusive of lots of different people. Just make sure that you include the possibility of having sometimes have somebody travel with the person that might need the person. It might need an assistant traveling with them, but it works.
So when did you start that program?
Oh, it's been around for a while. I mean,
Okay.
I forget, 96 maybe? I don't know. I'm just
Oh,
guessing.
okay.
It's been
And
around for
something,
quite a while. I've been involved since before it was started in advocating for it. So I'd have to search my memory banks.
so it could be expanded upon.
Oh yeah, it can be expanded. It already has been expanding.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying it's in place and
It's
it
already in
is
place.
possible. And also the paratransits could be expanded and the regular buses could be intermodal so that you could actually go from one to another easier.
Mm-hmm. And now for paratransit, you can actually do the application over the phone. There is a person that will help you do it over the phone. Uh, the Kennedy Center's Mary Rosenbauer will help over the phone. So she interviews and helps people with ADA. So she's the ADA coordinator there. And so that makes it easier instead of having to try to do it online when people sometimes, like you said, don't even have access to online, don't have Wi-Fi, don't have broadband.
The word as to how this is done, we need to get the word out. Because most of the people that need this information are not online or are only a little bit online or whatever, or it's a family member that is the one that's trying to find it out and they're not hooked up. They're too busy working trying to pay the rent.
So, and you were talking about the infrastructure bill that's been passed. And so what should the policymakers, what should they prioritize when it comes to the transportation and people being able to get the transportation that they need?
I think to begin with that we need to really do a lot of outreach in the community and get people to it's like a community survey. What do people want? What do people need? Because if it's imposed from the top and all the planning is from the top, it's not going to work. It has to be a grassroots from the community, and the more we should have uh, small gatherings in schools and libraries and whatever, and online, to invite people to talk about what it is, what are the problems, and what would help them. What would be the best thing that would help you? Would be a good question. What would be the thing that would help you the most? If you want to go at it with the positive side, yeah. So a lot of people would say, well, it would really be helpful if I had 24/7 access to transportation. That would be wonderful. It's possible. It's doable.
I definitely agree. There should be a very intentional organizing project where we are reaching out to even just the agencies that support the different populations, because then they can assist with getting meetings set up with different people. We should be talking to communities. We should be talking to people who are already on the ground organizing for other things like housing, disparities in healthcare. A lot of the stuff that they're dealing with also has to do with transportation.
Yes.
So there's a lot of work being done, and my concern in Connecticut has always been, why are there so many silos for such a small state? We only have 8 counties, and we can't seem to get this together because we have 169 fiefdoms. I mean, at some point, we need to be looking at how we can do things county by county or region by region, because if we keep going about with these small towns here and small towns there, or, Hartford, but we don't want you to come from Hartford into here, or New Haven, and we need to get away from that. I think that is such a disservice to every type of support that we have in the state, not just transportation. And one of my biggest concerns is, I work with Medicaid, so I tend to see numbers coming a little bit ahead of time. But, we have a lot of people who are going from 70 to 80 and from 80 to 90 still living.
Mhm.
We need to be able to show them, and I think of my mother as I say this, we need to be able to show them that even if you can't drive anymore, you can still get around to do all of the things that you wanted to do to enjoy your quality of life, because they're living longer and longer. We are all living longer and longer. But, we have whole groups that are left out of lending their voice to these conversations and the policy development that happens out of those conversations. So first priority is start talking to the communities. Second, I do think that in addition to talking to the communities, there does need to be a formal needs assessment study completed. We tend to give projects based on the loudest voice in the room, that type of thing. We need to have a different way that we do contracting and procurement with the infrastructure bill when that money comes out. And I really think that needs to be done. We need to contract somebody specifically to do a needs analysis, not just across Connecticut, but how can we connect Connecticut to Springfield and to New York, or to Boston and to New York, so that anybody who gets on a public transportation mode can get to one of those cities. There are lots of jobs out there that people will be able to get to, or lots of other places people may want to live. If they could see how, they'll get around.
Barbara in the chat said There's an urgency to address transportation as an ever-growing aging population will need more services in the coming decades, which is what you were just saying, the aging trend that certainly is impacting transportation. We must be
Yes.
integrated with housing, healthcare providers too, as people may not be able to stay in their current homes but want to live independently. Flexibility is key for willingness and acceptance to use public transportation.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Yes, very important. What we need is accessible, affordable, integrated, meaning that it's integrated, interconnected, transportation and housing and community services. Because if you have the transportation and you find an accessible place, but from that place you can't get your needs met, then you're still in trouble. So all different, and the community services is one of the keys, and it's at this point healthcare and home health aides and PCAs, personal care assistants, there's different terms people use. At this point, it's desperate. We fought so hard to provide opportunities for people to live in the community. And if we don't provide the services that make it possible, they can't do it. And right now, their medical staff is depleted. Not enough nurses, not enough aides of any kind, not enough PCAs, because among other things, they're not getting paid enough.
Well, they're not getting paid enough, but a lot of them will do the work if they could see how to get there. A lot of the support staff that work with people in their homes don't necessarily drive. They take the bus to get to their jobs. Yeah. I've had staff turn over just for that one reason, because we were actually paying very well. There's a family that I support with hiring their own staff. They actually pay very well, but to get to their job needed public transportation. So, we also have to think about that as when we're thinking about people who are aging or people who have physical disabilities that need ongoing support, or even just cognitive disabilities that need ongoing support. We have to think about where the staff, who are the staff? What do the staff usually look like? Where do they usually live? Because that actually is another group that faces a barrier.
Development. We need it. People need good jobs, and they also need health care.
But people who provide those types of services are usually mothers with young children who are depending on public transportation to get to and from their jobs.
Absolutely.
So we need to be able to have people be able to drop off their kids in one town and take a bus to another town so that they can go to work. Mm-hmm. We really need to think about this as we roll this out.
I'm with you about all of that, and it's all important, and we need to look at it holistically, that it's a community-wide issue. It's not
and
just...
Connecticut. Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, and Connecticut is small enough to be considered one big community. It's not like we're Texas. When you think about transportation infrastructure, just the actual rails, roads, trains that are in this state, you can look at that as one big community because we need to access each other. So, I don't think that that's impossible to look at this as a whole.
Absolutely.
As opposed to different sections. I do think some things need to be regional. I just don't think they need to be town by town.
Right.
And just for everybody's information, there are 5 regional, there's 5 regions with 5 mobility managers, and those mobility managers will help with free assistance with transportation guidance, travel training, and ADA support. So that was in the chat. And Tony's asking a question. Accessibility, affordability, and integrated. Which of those three needs the most work right now in your experience?
Integrated.
Elaine's shaking her head yes to that too. Okay. Great.
Integrated, yeah, because at this point there's too many silos on all different levels, and even in the same kind of system. You go to the wrong desk and you won't get the help you need, even if it's in the same building. So
And
it needs to be integrated. Go ahead.
And
Mhm.
integrated doesn't mean automatically call 211.
No.
Okay. So like that seems to be the canned answer for any kind of, oh, you need a direction to a service, call 211. Okay. That's how we're trained. However, integrated is far beyond just what we want to do as a system. Integration has to do with how someone lives in their community. You should be able to live in the community that you grew up in, went to school in, had friends in, as a person who needs to rely on public transportation without having to move to a town where public transportation is available. So if you grew up in Terryville and Plymouth, you shouldn't have to move to Bristol, Southington, or New Britain so that you can access a bus, but move away from the other supports that are really important for a person who needs ongoing support managing daily life. That, I mean, why would that won't trump, okay, let me put it this way. That won't trump the amount of support in the community that's already there. Natural supports built in growing up that you now have to sever yourself from because you want to be independent and have a job. Therefore, you need to live in a city that has more options for transportation. That's not fair. That's not fair. It also causes It also causes a burden on us as taxpayers, because if a person has natural supports in one community, but they have to leave that community to go live in another one for transportation accessibility purposes, we now have to pay for the supports in that new community just because of the transportation and housing issue. Whereas if we had transportation right in that community, they already have a home with their family and, all that type of thing. So, we really have to think about, when we're saying integration, we really need to think about community integration and then systemic integration.
Very well said.
So here's another question from Tony. We're coming into winter and snow removal season. Can the panelists talk about the challenges to mobility and safety this causes for reduced mobility users when sidewalks and bus stops aren't cleared of ice and snow? I'd also be curious to see thoughts on snow and ice from attendees here in the chat. So go ahead and chat away, people. Okay.
So I'll start with sharing a story. Before I got diagnosed with my eye issue, I just took myself off the road. I refused to drive. And I was in downtown Hartford in what we call the wind tunnel, because it's so cold there in the winter. And the one thing that I really struggled with back then was the snowbanks. There weren't enough places cut out where you can get over the snow that's between the sidewalk and the street to be able to get on the bus. They had it cut in certain places, but it would have been better if it just all got removed. The second thing that used to happen a lot is you're standing at the bus stop and then somebody passes by and splashes all this ice and cold water on you. And then you have to shiver and be wet until you get home. Okay, so I had some choices, and I have driving limitations, but I can drive myself and avoid that. Well, what about people who can't? So when we think about, where people wait for buses, that's one of the places we definitely need to make sure there aren't ponding areas and potholes, and maybe some sort of change in the curbing so that when a driver goes by, we're not soaking wet and cold, because that's a safety issue if you have Raynaud's syndrome.
Yeah.
Well, All I can say is that when wintertime comes, a whole bunch of us are trapped.
Yep.
Um, and not, especially people in wheelchairs, but also anybody who walks with difficulty in snow and ice. It's a huge problem. Anybody that, like you say, has visual limitations. It's and yes, part of it again is enforcement because they just don't clear the sidewalks in whole areas, and they don't clear the bus stops. So the thing is that, huh, in the winter time, and I'm thankful because I have a good power chair, and but every winter, because I do go out, I hit a slick spot and end up in a snowbank, jammed into the snowbank at some point. And thankfully, I do have the capacity to, with considerable difficulty, get up out of the wheelchair. And I know my wheelchair well enough to know how to disengage so that it rolls. But then it really does roll. So it could, I mean, it's scary, it's dangerous, it's potentially life threatening. And then we fought so hard to get the curb cuts. But guess what? Where does it pond? It ponds in the curb cuts. And do you know what then happens? You don't have any other way, so you go through the water and your chair shorts out. So you're sitting there in the cold by yourself. You better have a cell phone. You're sitting there with your chair not working. That's what happens. And
And that's
then,
poor design.
yeah.
Mhm.
And then, do you know what it's like to go in the street when there's snow on both sides of the street plus traffic? It's terrifying. So, yeah, it's a pretty big deal for a whole lot of people. Once again, the on call, accessible, affordable taxi services, because Uber doesn't work for most of us. Uber's either too expensive or it's not accessible. So we need more dial-a-ride, paratransit, all different kinds of things along those lines should be expanded. And definitely the accessible taxi thing, and it should be 24/7.
Tony has put in the chat that there was a success story in Hartford. Hartford's Complete Streets, that they finally got Department of Public Works to set up a notification, warning, and fine system for snow clearing and curb cuts after storms. Not perfect, but it's gotten much better. The challenge is that it is based on resident Hartford 311 complaints rather than a uniform citywide approach. So again, if people complain about it, something gets done about it. And then Hartford can give out warnings and tickets to property owners if they haven't cleared their sidewalks, et cetera. And Tony says because of this now, they've noticed a difference. So, but it took getting a change to the city ordinances to get this in play. So that's definitely something that other towns and cities can do, is they can get their ordinances changed so that clearing the streets and clearing the curbs becomes something that's finable. Let's see, what else?
Yeah, I'm with the M7. It's now called it. That's what they call the accessible taxi now. Used to be Metro Access back when I first
Oh,
got my
okay,
first
and that's
card.
the 203-777-7777
Yeah. I
number?
just
Okay.
also wanted people to know that, see, there's a linkage between the accessible taxis and the paratransit, because if you sign up for the paratransit and you are approved for paratransit, then you can get a reduced half price taxi card, and that is huge because you know it's taxis can be pretty darned expensive, but at least if you can do it for half price. I just did it the other day because I had to take my cat who was dying to the vet. I thought maybe she was dying, but I was hoping they could help her. But anyway, so I got paratransit to take me there, but I didn't know when I would be coming back because I didn't know what kind of schedule to set up. So thankfully, because there is accessible taxis, I had the choice of calling an accessible taxi to get myself back, sadly without my precious little Izzy girl. But at least I could do it. See, that's the thing. Having the option, having a choice, having something that's possible. Those of us that are low income and struggling, we don't ask for easy. We ask for possible. But then you need to know how to utilize or access the possibilities. That's why we need to communicate with each other more, share this information every way possible. That's why today is so important. And thanks to everyone who has joined in on this. And I appreciate everyone. I personally like to see people's faces, but I understand it's, you know, it's different strokes for different folks. But I put my email in the chat, and I'll do it again. And please, we are in this together. This is something that we can do together. We can do it. We can make positive changes, but it takes ongoing collective effort, and then we have to be persistent and insistent and consistent and realize that some things take a long time. It's not going to be a snap of your fingers, but it can be done.
Mm-hmm. Barbara put in a comment about there are lots of jobs in retail, restaurant, and entertainment on Universal Drive in North Haven. There are no sidewalks for much of Universal Drive. I often see folks walking along Universal Drive since the bus route they used does not connect to Universal Drive. It's dangerous, add weather conditions, really dangerous. Adding a bus stop without access to sidewalks to get to their destination is disrespectful. And so that's another issue, is having just even the bus shelter, and having the bus shelter that, you know, keeps people out of the weather. Maybe it's, you know, it's a little cooler for the summer, and maybe it has a little bit of heat for the winter. And then Jess Nelson put in, as a disabled homeowner, I'm pretty stuck. I can't clear my own sidewalk, so I pay a lot to get it cleared by someone else. It's a financial burden in a bad winter. I also can't get around because of uncleared sidewalks. We need to remember that not every homeowner is able-bodied, and not find people without investigating the reasons behind the failure to clear their sidewalks. But that's another.
But that's another community thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We should be taking care of our neighbors, getting to know our neighbors, provide community assistance, barter. Mm-hmm. I mean, I grew up in a small town, a shoe factory town. When I was growing up, you knew all your neighbors. And in fact, sometimes you would get disciplined by your neighbors. And then when your parents found out about it, you'd get it again. But it was a community. We need to create those kinds of communities as much as we can across every barrier that we can think of. We are in this together. Mm-hmm. So yes.
And one of the places to start too is the senior centers.
Absolutely.
As April says, there are many programs to assist seniors and people with disabilities with snow removal, and that's done through some of the senior centers. So another question for the panel is, what haven't people heard today that they should or they need to hear?
Well, if we're talking about the community at large, we have these types of conversations all the time, but it's usually the same people that are in the rooms. So it's all of us that are interested or working in the field or have been involved in things for a really long time, that we are the ones that are having these conversations. But we have to find a way to bring more voices into the conversation. We need to find a way to have more of the residents that actually vote for our lawmakers, our policymakers, to understand why doing specific types of infrastructure changes with universal design, how that also benefits them, so that they, through their vote or through their voice, can move the political will forward to get some of this work done. So I would say what people haven't heard are people who are outside of my network, who are not even checked into this process. They need to hear that this process is happening. We really need to do a really great campaign that involves TV, social media, radio, that here's a place you can contribute your voice to infrastructure changes that are coming. Here are some things that we want to hear from you that are needed in your community. I was just on another transportation panel on Friday morning, and one of the conversations was how to connect Hartford to Springfield, to Worcester, to Boston. There isn't a direct connection. It's along the shoreline. Okay, but how do we get people to understand that if they buy into expanding the service from Hartford to Springfield, that actually increases their ability to have jobs? Because there are places in Windsor, Springfield, Worcester that are hiring that are probably less than an hour away by train, and we just don't have that option. We could also live in different communities that might be less costly because they're on the train line or they're just a suburb just close enough to a city, that we don't have to just say, okay, I can only live in New Haven or Hartford or New Britain because those are the places where I have public transportation. You should be able to live wherever you want. So we need people to hear that your communities will grow and be more vibrant. If you want to use the money thing, it'll increase your tax base. If more people lived in your community, well, more people will live in your community if they found a way in and out of your community that doesn't involve a car. And then the larger conversation is, how does it benefit those in the future? When are we going to make mass transit work for the generation coming behind? This generation is showing more neurodiversity. This generation is showing more willingness to connect with each other virtually. And that's a whole different set of accommodations that would need to be made. The infrastructure at this point would be more internet-based. But neurodiversity, I don't know, I don't want to, okay, so neurodiverse people are people who are on the autism spectrum or have ADHD or Tourette's or those types of things, what we call the hidden disabilities. But they need to work. They're brilliant. Elon Musk is neurodiverse. They are brilliant, but because of the limitations around driving for them, they have to depend on public transportation. And so we need to consider those individuals when we make design choices going forward, because they're going to be the generation using whatever we build now. So, those are the types of people and conversations that I think we need to connect with and have them hear what we're talking about versus have what we need to hear. We've been hearing all of this. We've all experienced this. We all get the complaints. We all have to find creative ways to work around the system. We're all doing this. So we don't need to hear anything else. We need those people to hear that options and opportunities are there and get them checked into the process so that we can move political will forward either by voting or not voting for someone who is for this work. And that's simply it.
Thank you.
Oh, Bavern, you are just so cool. I'm so glad you joined because you have had so many different dimensions and um, qualities that are so important because we are everyone. See, what I want everyone to understand that most people don't get, non-disabled people are afraid of disability. It's just a fact. I know I used to be one of them. I didn't realize that I was infected by ableism. I thought I was very nice to people with disabilities, or handicapped people, we called them back then. And, I thought everybody should have, a good life. But I did not understand how completely my identity was tied up in my physicality. I was very athletic. And then the next thing, kaboom, I could never run again, could barely walk. Whole different ball game. This is the point I want people to understand is this. As people with disabilities, we are everyone. The best way I've ever found to express not having any kind of prejudice came from my glorious great-grandmother who lived to be 106 and a half. Bless her soul. Grace Euphemia Oliver Minor was her name. And some people would say she wasn't an educated person. Well, but she was very, very wise and extremely kind and rather feisty. And she taught us there's all kinds of people in all kinds of people. Say that. There's all kinds of people in all kinds of
All
people.
kinds of people.
Have you ever
Mhm.
heard it any better? Isn't that brilliant?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the thing. And the thing is, people with disabilities, just statistically, we are worldwide the largest minority. We are also absolutely, totally inclusive. There are all kinds of people, but yes, all the other ways you cut the cards and stuff. If you are a member of another disadvantaged minority, yes, there will be a higher percentage of people with disabilities because of those disadvantages. It's just a fact. So we, at any one time, we are the largest minority. And yet, let's expand it a little bit more and stop thinking so linearly. Let's look at lifespan experience. We are all human, and as human beings, we have lifespans. Disability is a majority experience in our lifetime, in our lifespan. And if not ourselves, some people are just so healthy and all of a sudden, boom, they die and they never have a disability. That's rare.
Right.
Most people have at least something that happens, or if you live long enough, you will.
Exactly.
So either you're born with a disability,
Or you acquire one.
or you acquire a disability, or if you live long enough, you surely will have one, and then everybody's going to die. That's just a fact. So you're not going to not die. But people say they want the right to die. Excuse me, you're going to die. That's a guarantee. We want the right to live with dignity. That's our message. We want the right to live with dignity in freedom, with universal basic mobility and universal design. And that includes everyone, with respect for everyone and individual needs, and the fact that individual requirements will change over time and different accommodations can be provided. That's when you start seeing that we really are in this together. And everybody on this call, you've got friends and family members, if not yourself, with disabilities right now. And I'm sure there are some, I have no idea how many, percentage-wise, we're talking about at least 20%, they say usually, of are people with disabilities. So I would guess there's a good chance there's a whole bunch of folks on this call right now that have disabilities, chronic conditions. Not all of them are the visible,
Right.
poster child
Right.
kinds of things,
Hmm.
but they're real and they have real life effects and they really affect how you manage your life. And when we're talking about transportation, whether or not you can move freely and get your needs met. And that's what we want to make sure people have at least a fighting chance to do.
Right. And one of the opportunities that Tony's brought up as far as, what kind of next steps are, we could make sure to include those with mobility devices or other mobility challenges on what is called walk audits to evaluate sidewalks, bus stops, crosswalks, and accessibility. And
Yay.
that participation adds invaluable input that others might miss. And
Absolutely.
he actually put in a URL in here where people can click on it so that they can, if they would like to participate in a walk audit or learn more about walk audits, they can. And that could be one of the starting points as well, is to do a walk audit. And there's a question in the chat: does Connecticut get any funding from the recent passage of the infrastructure bill to assist in accessibility, sidewalk improvements, etc.? Personally, I don't know that, but maybe one of you ladies do.
So on the conference that I was on Friday, they are talking about how to use funds to make sure that we have good multimodal transportation centers connecting to any lines that they build. The issue is, for that money to be used, we have to make sure that there's enough of a community voice to let them know that this is something they need to consider, because in that room, it just sounded like the larger process. There was no one in that room talking about accessibility more than just, the typical ramping curb cuts situation right now. So we really need to engage either a cohort of people or an organized group of people and get them involved on that panel. I just happened to get invited, but I actually reached out to Anthony and was like, these are silos. Why aren't people from our groups on this larger group that's deciding what to do with the money?
Because they usually have it as a closed club. That's why we have to get really noisy. And we have to speak up. And we have to band together. And so I would like to see us, this little collection of people, come up with something to move forward with that we could do. Maybe a follow-up thing, a Zoom call even. I want to talk more to people. Any of the other ones that have shown up, bless you. You've stuck with us through all of this, or at least your names are still up there. And a number have put stuff in the chats. Thank you. I mean, this is encouraging. This means that real people really do care about these issues and are willing to do something. Let's do it. And one of the things that I can offer is I'm a songwriter. And one of the things that we can do is we can create a video and use my song, We Will Ride, and show all different kinds of people using all different kinds of transportation. And we can all be singing We Will Ride. We can use this to get public awareness and also to draw people in, because some people, they might not come to one of these. Well, okay, yeah, the song, well, hey, one of the things I would like to do is, I can't do it right now, but I'm going to send the email with the link and with me singing the song, and also there have been um, movies, videos that have been made using my song and then with pictures of people that my friends and sometimes me, when we were demonstrating and getting arrested to get the ADA passed. We would have nothing now if we didn't get that done. What would we have now? And we have to fight to hold on to it. But how do we do that? We have to do it by building a community culture where we
Yeah.
have a sense of connectedness and ownership, and that we feel we're needed, that we have something we can contribute, and that we can make a positive difference. Right now, don't get in despair. We can make a positive difference. Together we can. It's possible. And we can sing, and it's fun.
So I'm always for how holding our elected officials accountable, right? So John Larson is the lead from the Connecticut delegation on the funds coming in for the infrastructure bill. So if you are in his district, definitely write him a letter, but feel free to write that letter to the other 4 people who are in the delegation. So we really need to reach out to them, especially Mr. Larson, because that's where he's the one that championed the funding coming into the state. Second, we need to reach out to the mayors in our town, just to let them know, like, you guys are the ones that deliver the end-to-end services. They're the ones that move the snow. They're the ones that, and we pay them taxes. So we need to let them know that I want you to get loud when you're in your committee about what's coming into your town to make sure that some of this is accessibility work, it gets done. And then finally, the Department of Transportation, Commissioner's Office, I believe they have a spokesperson. Jim Redica is the commissioner, but usually each department has a communications person out of the commissioner's office. It's on the website. They need to hear. When you are planning these types of changes, please keep these people in mind. 1 or 2 of us doing it is not enough, because we've been doing it as case managers from DDS over the years, different times. We've also taken families up to the LOB, helped them create letter writing campaigns, but it's just a small set of voices. If we had more, we would actually affect change. So I think if we really just started being very intentional with our communications with our legislators and our town managers or mayors, we will be sharing a message that starts resonating as they talk to each other and start saying, oh, I've been getting this in my office. I've been getting this from my office. The conversation now rises to the level where they're actually making those decisions.
That's great, Bavern. And I know that there are a number of my AARP Connecticut colleagues on this call today, and we are all very involved in livable communities. And so this might be something that we could chat about offline, but perhaps we can get like a letter writing campaign going or something along those lines. I know that people are very interested in this, and that any help we can provide is, I'm sure that we would like to do that. So
and just to add, this is a year that they are getting ready for re-election.
That's
so
right.
This is a year you can probably get some stuff done because they're going to want to do it to get reelected.
And Anthony just posted that Congressman John Larson was on an earlier session today on the federal infrastructure bill. And that session will be available soon as a recorded for folks. So, and yes, reach out and let our legislators know that transportation needs to be accessible, frequent, convenient, and integrated. I know that's one of Elaine's favorite words, integrated. So we have
universally designed.
And universally designed, yes. So we have a few more minutes. Just want to make some closing remarks before Charlotte takes over. Elaine?
Mobility is one of the things that is a characteristic of being human. We move.
Mhm.
How you treat the least is how you improve the most.
Every voice needs to be listened to, and even those who cannot speak themselves can communicate in some way. We need to make it possible for everyone to live with dignity and to travel as freely as possible. This is so huge. The time that we're in right now. We have the choices. We can choose to whether we're going to go towards real, true community, or if we're going to keep going for the only thing that matters is the money. It's our choice. And I know what I choose. I love community. I am so thankful for everyone who has taken the time to join this today, because we have many choices as to what we can do with ourselves these days. If nothing else, sometimes we just go into la la land. But this was important. We together can make a positive difference for ourselves and for the future. Let's do it.
And thank you for having me as well. And, reach out to me. I did put my email in the chat. I may want to start collecting some data on this so we can help it, get an organizational movement passing this legislation in a way that works for us locally.
Great. And Anthony just posted that Garrett Eucalito, I apologize if I didn't say that correctly, is the Connecticut DOT Deputy Commissioner, and he's going to be on the call tonight from 6 to 7:30. The session is called Designing Streets for People. People include those with accessibility challenges and all ages. So anybody on this call right now may want to join that one at 6 o'clock tonight.
And that one will be in the safer track. So the same link that you used to join this meeting, we're going to close this Zoom for the roundtable to make room for the seminar from 4:30 to 6. And then we'll be reopening this safer track for the 6 p.m. session on designing streets for people. So it may be that session or one of the others you may be interested. But please don't miss the 4:30 p.m. actually starts at 4:35. So you've got a chance to take a break there. And that roundtable is on community and institutional dialogue, and it's talking to experts in the field and community advocates and activists and institutional operators on their best practices. So please do join the roundtable and keep in touch. And thank you very much, Betty, and our panelists for such a great conversation, and everyone that joined today in the chat and had questions or comments or best practices that they wanted to share. So Godspeed and clear access for everyone today. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Valerie Fernandez. I got involved in sustainable transportation and environmental justice as a transport rifle ambassador. Now I'm currently a sophomore at the Connecticut State University studying criminology and sociology to become a lawyer. I want to thank you all for attending to our summit. I am so glad that you were able to join us today in this stimulating discussion. Please let's stay in touch. You can sign up for a newsletter, you can attend to our events, and even sponsor or work for us if interested. We hope to see you around.